Welcome to the Brown County Hour.
Coming to you from the legendary Hills of Brown,
where the plum purple haze,
the one nature herself drapes over the hills and hollers,
inspires local characters, artists, and nature lovers.
It's as though the hills themselves conspire to create a beauty and culture in the heart of Indiana.
Sit for a spell and hear the music.
tall tales,
true stories,
and current goings-on.
Brought to you by folks who still know how to sit by a fire in winter
And swim buck naked in summer. Welcome to episode 83 of the Brown County Hour. This is Dave Seastrom.
and Vera Grubbs, along with the rest of our crew. In this month's show, our musical guest is Rick Clayton, and we'll listen to our interview and some tunes from his band, The Late Show. We also have a new installment of On the Road with Cari Ray, and Dave Seastrom has an essay he calls Winter Survival.
We'll listen to an interview with the new director of the Community Foundation, Madison Miller, and we'll have a discussion with herbalist Susan Clearwater about her new book, The Art of Herbal Healing and a Guide to Health and Wellness. And our friend Rick Fettig has a few words to say about February.
We begin the show with our interview with Rick Clayton. In her latest installment of On the Road with Cari Ray, she shares a piece called The Wall. And we'll close this segment with The Late Show and their tune, Hello, Linda.
Gonna do now that he's gone. Hey girl, I saw you smiling when I came along. Hey girl, are you looking for another?
This evening we have Rick Clayton in, and he's been a frequent guest on the show. And tonight he's going to talk about one of his other endeavors, which is his involvement with the band The Late Show. Welcome aboard, Rick.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I spent a good portion of the afternoon going through your material on the Late Show, and I realized your 1980 album, Portable Pop, has recently been reissued, and you guys are starting a whole new cycle in this band.
We recorded that album live in Indianapolis. We tried to do it in a studio, and we just didn't like the sound. And this was right after I joined them, too. And then we just ended up setting everything up out on the loading dock in the back and recorded it live, and that's how we did that album. And we always wanted a live kind of setting. If you've heard it, then it's, you can tell it's kind of Beatle-y and four-piece rock and roll band. And then it was an album, and we toured and supported it and everything. So we played a lot of Southern colleges, and we played out in New York a few times and had some interest from different labels up until I think I took my first hiatus, 92. Actually, we reformed. We've been back together for about 8 years now. We recorded the new one now. I don't know if you've heard that one.
I did.
Sha-la-la. And we have a record label in Memphis. A lot of our stuff was in Memphis. Our record label is called Trashy Creatures. We recorded this a few years ago. We recorded enough basically for 2 CDs. And so that one came out, and we're doing finishing touches on the second one that'll be out in March. And at that time, we're going to go back to Memphis, and we're going to set up like we did for Portable Pop, but we're going to set up in the studio and record live, kind of a garage bandy kind of thing.
Wow.
Because we get pegged into this indie alt-rock.
Tell us the names of the band members.
The band is Don Main. He's the principal songwriter and lead singer. Mark Moran is the lead guitar player. They've been together since high school at North Central. And Chris Pyle is the drummer, which he's played with Steve Lee and some people around here, but he is just an amazing drummer. And then me. There's 4 of us. And Joe Moran is our sound man.
So tell us a little bit about being on Little Steven's Underground Garage.
Well, Little Steven Springsteen's guitar player got a hold of our cut and just thought it was really cool. And actually, they have a thing on their station. I think they have 45 million listeners. I don't know how Sirius XM goes at this point. But they have a thing, and every week they have the coolest song in the world. And Sha-La-La, he picked it as the coolest song in the world that week.
Nice.
So he was on heavy rotation. That was the end of July. So August, it played every 4 hours for a week to 45 million listeners. And then I think 82 Q stations picked it up over the country, too.
Yeah.
So when the next one comes out in March, we're hoping he'll pick that up, too. He's listening. He liked what he heard.
Quite a compliment.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have these little blogs now. They're not little. I mean, they have large readerships and whatever it is. But one guy publishes a book every 20 years or so. It's called Shake Some Action. And he put our first album, Portable Pop, at number 23 out of 200 since, I think, between 1974 and 2017. And then wrote a chapter on us, and it was pretty cool. And then there's another one called Gold Mine, which is kind of a similar independent releases, the top one. These are the ones you never hear that you should, that kind of thing. And they put our new album on there at 23 out of 50, I think, something like that. So it gets around in that way nowadays.
Well, according to what I read, you guys have opened for almost everybody.
We did a lot of doing that.
So you must have some pretty good stories about meeting some of the greats or near greats or.
Oh yeah. My favorite one was when we opened for the Pretenders.
Okay.
It was at the Agora in Columbus, Ohio. I love that band, and I still love that band. And Chrissy Hine is a great songwriter, but they were coming off at the end of their first tour after they had their first hit, and they were tired and raggy and mad. So basically, we got no sound check. We set everything up, and she paced the stage back and forth, cursing at the sound and this and that. And she paced until it was about 5 minutes till it was time for us to play. But that was kind of cool. That's how we rolled back then. And even now, we're just a good unit. And we have a chemistry among us that just has always been there from the first rehearsal. And we just went on and stormed. All the reviews the next day were saying Pretenders were okay, but Light Show.
Nice.
So it was nice. And we did the Rockin' Picnic Jam. Q95 used to do that. That was probably the biggest stage. I think there were 30,000 people there for that. And Julian Lennon and the Romantics and the Ramones and lots of different people.
Billy Gibbons?
I met Billy Gibbons, yes. Well, we were at Ardent again. We got to meet a lot of people down there. This is where Zeppelin recorded and all that, and it's a very nice studio. And they were recording Eliminator, the one with Give Me All Your Lovin'. But Billy Gibbons was a hero of mine and still is. He's a great guitar player. And I went out to get a Coke. In the break room, he's laying here on the floor with his head on the edge of a coffee table. And I just thought, oh my gosh, there he is. Said, hey, Billy, nice to meet you. Recording next to you. I read a recent interview, and he's really articulate and he's like a philosopher.
Okay.
But I suppose you can be that after you've, done
gone through the process.
Yeah.
You guys, you're older now, and you're meeting probably with more success than you have in the past with this band. And that's kind of an interesting evolution to take place at this time in your lives. And from what I understand, you're now only playing large venues, that your management has decided you guys are no longer playing the bars. And
yeah, they took us off that. It's not necessarily large venues. We've got a couple slots at the Hi-Fi up in Indy coming up sometime soon. Openers for other bands that have labels and are touring, basically. It's a different industry now, than what we're used to.
So if we're going to see you in Brown County, it's probably going to be at the Maple Leaf.
Might be.
Yeah.
We played at the Playhouse. I don't know, how many, 5 years ago?
Sure.
Yeah. Great. It was fun. I think a lot of the people that I knew that came to see us, because I would play here on my own at Muddy Boots and, Pine Room and kind of the sweet country air kind of thing, and they were really not ready for really loud rock and roll because that's what we play. And it was some of the older ladies that were there were like hands over their ears and dressed me down after we were done. But that's a great sounding room, and it's fun. A lot of fun to play there.
Oh, I love the Playhouse.
Well, we played for a living all of our lives. So, while we were trying to promote our own material and all that, we still would play Southern Fraternities and Vogue and Patio and Bluebird and Jakes and all that back then. And, we played Beatles and Fettig and Kinks and Who and things like that. That's how we made our living doing that. And, the labels, when this one came out and the Little Steven thing happened on the Sirius XM, they said, okay, get off of that circuit, do openers and play things where you can play your own material. It's an evolution, especially since we're older.
Yeah. So is there a reluctance to tour now that you guys are getting a little longer in the tooth? Or?
I think we would probably do it. And there's been talk about 3 festivals that they want us to get on. Again, the independent label kind of indie rock, alt rock thing. One in Austin and one in New York and San Francisco. I think they have these festivals, and they've talked about us playing there. Not any kind of 8-week grueling tour like we used to do.
Yeah, that's a little grueling, eh?
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out the business now. It's different with iTunes and Spotify and Pandora and all of that. But we're over at my son's house up in Indianapolis the other day, and he goes, "Hey, watch, play Late Show." And, Alexa kicks on, and our album cover comes up on his big screen TV, and he's playing the whole album. And I'm like, cool. Did you have to buy that?
Yeah.
No, you just play it. And now it's like,
am I getting any money for this?
Right. So it's sketchy how you make a living doing that, unless you're Beyonce,
Right.
and you're selling lots of merchandise.
Speaking of all of that, do you guys have a Facebook page, a website?
We do. We have the Late Show Band Facebook page. The Late Show Band. You have to say the Late Show Band.
Okay.
Because there's lots of late shows.
Right.
For TV shows. And Burger King had a late night drive-through called The Late Show when our album came out, and we had to do negotiating with them because they wanted to claim the name, and it was decided it was public domain.
And if you agreed to eat a few hamburgers, maybe they'd back off.
We ate plenty of drive-through hamburgers.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. But we did spend a lot of time in the southern Alabama and Mississippi places looking for good barbecue.
And that would be worth the effort.
Oh, yeah.
So if we want to find out where you're playing next, your Facebook page would be the ideal place.
Yeah.
All right.
That's where I find out.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for
You're
coming
more
in
than
and
welcome.
sharing your stories.
I'll take a chance on you. I'm the one with the bad reputation. I heard all the talk, it's not my imagination. No. Already you've been through all my friends. Yeah. Round and round, the turns they never end. Hey girl, what you gonna do now that he's gone?
Touring has had our duo, Cari Ray and the Shaky Legs, more on the road than back again over the past few months. Most recently, we found ourselves in Texas Hill Country during the holidays. It was, in many ways, a year of adventure for us, so it seemed fitting to embark on one more before the calendar turned over. We'd been hearing from our Texas friends for some time that Big Bend National Park should be on any outdoor lover's bucket list. Given our proximity and the fact that we were noodling on how to spend Christmas anyway, since we were away from our families, we planned our first destination holiday, a modest collection of wrapped packages, and our intrepid little tabletop Tannenbaum were lovingly stowed, and we pointed the caravan west and then south toward the fabled Rio Grande. Traditionally, the Thanksgiving to New Year timeframe is one of the busiest seasons in the park. But other than a little congestion at what could be considered one of its main attractions, the entrance to Santa Elena Canyon, it didn't seem that crowded to us. That could have been in part due to the partial government shutdown that occurred as we slumbered under a full solstice moon. With NPS staff on furlough, the park had issued a soft close. While sanitary facilities and roads were still open and visitors were allowed to be on premises, there were extremely limited services and all visitor centers were closed, which meant no maps nor advice for us. There's also virtually no cell coverage in the park, which meant no online guidance either. So we just used the absence of direction as a welcome excuse to wander. And wander we did. Our 3 days of hiking 10-plus miles of trails and exploring over 150 miles on scenic paved and dirt roads had us in an ever-changing landscape as we climbed up, down and around the 6,000 feet of altitude change in the park's 800,000 plus acres of geological diversity. From wetland to desert, mesa, spring, canyon, river, and mountain basin, the variety of terrain and climate in such a relatively small area was truly remarkable. Oh, and did I mention the views? There's something about the combination of a sun hat on my noggin, trusty pack on my back, and boots on a trail that sparks a lifting in my spirit that quickly rises to lift the corners of my mouth before I even realize what's happening. Now, the irony was not lost on us that we were staying within yards of the U.S.-Mexico border during a government shutdown that was mainly the result of a political standoff regarding funding for a wall along said border. I think the way I felt about it after visiting Big Bend myself was summed up by a retired Big Bend park ranger who said, "The only people who believe that a wall down here is a good idea are people who have never seen this country." I mean, the mere visualization of an 18 to 30 foot high man-made barrier encroaching on some of the amazing views, not to mention blocking river access to wildlife that depends on it, left me a little heartsick. Thankfully, due to some pretty active protesting back in 2017, the odds of the proposed wall including stretches in the park have diminished significantly. We humans sure do love to draw lines. It starts young with those made in playground dust by the dragging toe of a dirty sneaker. As we get older, we construct fences around fields and ranches, stacked rock around pastures, and walls around gated neighborhoods. We seem somehow attracted to the separation. I am me, you are you. This is mine, that is yours. Now, I don't pretend to understand the intricacies of political discourse nor international diplomacy. In fact, there's a heap that I don't know a heap about. But I have observed a few things over the decades. For one, I've noticed that it can be very tricky to construct a real or virtual wall to keep others out and not become, in a way, confined yourself. I also noticed that when I try to throw an oversimplified solution at a complex problem, it rarely if ever works. This isn't my partisan or political opinion. It's just been my personal observation. Even if one's a proponent of the promised result, a more secure border, a scan of history will offer a quick schooling on how ineffective fences and walls have been at accomplishing that task. In nearly every case, the wall immediately or eventually failed. Can I get behind the idea of a secure border? Sure. But history has shown us again and again that they're made by friendly, or at least peaceful, neighbors working together to make it so. I believe this to be true, and no political speech nor argument from a bully pulpit is likely to sway me. The steps to being a good neighbor and the fruits of that effort are as true across an international border as they are across a Brown County holler. The playground gets bigger, the dirty sneakers turn into wingtips, and lines in the dust become fences and walls. But for centuries at least, the conundrum hasn't changed, and separation has and never will be the answer. This is Cari Ray, wishing you Godspeed, and coming to you from the border with love.
Hello, Linda, your voice still sounds the same. I'm so glad I swallowed my pride and called the number next to your name. I know you thought that I'd be gone a year, be mad? Could I make it glad to see me? Believe me, I would never leave again if you let me in. If you let me in. If you let me in.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 at Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
In segment 2, we'll listen to our interview with the new director of the Brown County Community Foundation, Madison Miller. Our own Rick Fettig shares a few words about February, and we'll close with the Late Show tune, Tears.
Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Madison Miller, who is our new CEO of the Community Foundation. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And welcome to the community.
Thank you.
You know, I was reading in the Brown County Democrat, which is where I get a lot of my information, and I see that you were an accountant for an analytics company working with state government, and you were a legislative assistant in the Indiana Senate for the Majority Caucus, and twice named top 25 Hoosier politicos under 25.
It's been a number of years ago.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was such a thing. So that's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, and what did you do?
Sure. So I spent about the last 10 years or so working in state government in various capacities, as you just read off. I started off in the state Senate, working for two of the longest-serving senators in our General Assembly, which was a great learning experience, such a wealth of knowledge through those gentlemen. And then once I started, they could never get rid of me. So I would go back to school for a semester, and then I would come back to the State House in the spring because we're a part-time legislature, and then kind of back and forth for a while. I was a bill clerk. I lobbied for the telecommunications industry for a while. I've served on with some various nonprofits, and most recently with SAS, which is the data analytics company that you mentioned, working with all of our government agencies to modernize their data analytics projects and make sure that they're doing some real forward-thinking decision-making using the data that they have. And I worked on some interesting projects there that helped Hoosiers across the state.
Well, with all that interest in state government, how come you didn't run?
Oh boy, that is a great question. I never really had an interest in being out front politically. I really loved working behind the scenes, especially when I was at the State House. My favorite part of the job was helping constituents that would call in and they had an issue with some agency and they just needed someone to sort of cut through the bureaucratic red tape and point them in the right direction to help them get an answer to the problem that they had. That was really my favorite part of the job. So never wanted to be out front. Wanted to be, getting things done.
I've had a minor exposure to politics myself, and I think sometimes that just rinses the desire to be in the legislature right out of you. I see where you have moved from Indianapolis, and you just mentioned that you had urban chickens in Indianapolis, which I grew up there, and I'm having a real hard time picturing chickens in Indianapolis.
It's becoming more and more popular, actually. Most homeowners covenants are allowing it and zoning permits it. So where there are urban homestead businesses popping up in Indianapolis that are very popular. That's where I got my chickens and my feed. So it's becoming, a more acceptable practice, I'd say that. We had a rooster for a while, but we had to send him to the farm.
I was just going to say, were you allowed to have a rooster? Because that's a big issue in Bloomington.
I think we were technically allowed to have one, but the day that our rooster started crowing, we threw him up on Craigslist and had someone come get him because I didn't want the neighbors to really hate us after that. It was once he found his voice, he just couldn't stop.
So your husband, Alex, is going to nursing school.
He is.
And is that at IU in Bloomington? Or?
No, he's actually doing a program through Marian University in Indianapolis.
Okay.
It's an accelerated nursing program for second-degree students.
Okay, excellent. The other thing I was reading about is this $50,000 grant from an organization called ROI. What is that organization, and what are you guys going to do with the money?
Fantastic. So ROI stands for the Regional Opportunities Initiative.
Okay.
It's funded through the Lilly Foundation out of the Bloomington Monroe Community Foundation. And essentially, it's an 11-county region in southwest central Indiana that they are billing as the Indiana Uplands. So they're doing a very interesting studies in the region, both housing studies, quality of place, and workforce development, trying to understand why people like to live here, how we can attract new business owners and new folks to move into the area. And we're using our $50,000 planning grant to really identify a list of projects in the community that's going to help those quality of place and workforce development initiatives. And then we can go after several rounds of funding through Lilly Foundation. So right now we're just trying to make sure that we have a really healthy list of projects that's also prioritized, which is the hard part.
Can you share some of those projects with us?
I can't right now because we are meeting next week, actually. Our stakeholder and community engagement meetings are next week, where we're going to be talking about this together to try to bring that list together.
Well, I think I saw a few things that at least you were personally concerned about.
Sure. Yeah, so part of the study is just looking at where we are here in Brown County in terms of workforce attraction and a host of other issues. And part of that is looking at housing. What sort of housing do we have available if we were to attract new businesses? Do we have the employers that can staff those new jobs coming in? How do we address problems like declining school enrollment, making sure that our schools have a healthy budget and are thriving? How do we address issues like literacy? And when we have half of our kids in the county on free and reduced lunches, then food security is an issue. Those are the sort of issues that I'm really interested in diving into, the bigger problems that we have as Brown Countyans and how we can address them.
We can't, if we are only a retirement destination, that completely changes who we are as a county.
Mm-hmm. That's why we've been encouraging young families and folks with young children who are in the schools who have ideas on amenities that they want to have here in the community that will help make them stay or that could attract their other friends to move to the county. I mean, that's why it's so important to make sure that they're involved in this process as we're identifying those community projects.
Well, I would think a huge component of that is some kind of enterprise that allows more than a living wage so people can actually afford housing.
Most definitely. I think the last number I saw is that the majority of the county, they make at around $30,000 a year, and that's really difficult for a lot of families.
Yeah.
We're wrapping up our 25th anniversary celebration here at the foundation, which everyone's been talking about all year long. And 25 years ago, the reason that we were able to become an organization was through a challenge grant from the Lilly Foundation. Mm-hmm. They said, if you can raise $1 million, we're going to give you this funding, and you can start an endowment and grow your assets and start giving out grants that are important to your community. And it was very much a grassroots effort. And so here we are, 25 years later, we have almost $11 million in our endowment. We've given out over $11 million to the community, and that's around $500,000 a year, depending on how well our investments are doing. And we're in phase 7 of the Lilly Gift Initiative. So phase 7 is really all about unrestricted endowment building. And so they're offering a really interesting challenge of $2 to $1 match. So if we were to receive an unrestricted donation of $100, then we would get $300 match. So it's really fantastic. And all of our unrestricted dollars go towards paying for the competitive grants that you might read about in the Brown County Democrat every year. So they're going to pay for things related to Mother's Cupboard or Habitat for Humanity or Peaceful Valley Preservation. All of those projects that we're talking about, those are all paid with those dollars. So it's really important that we continue to build our unrestricted endowment, and Lily understands that, and that's why they're making this challenge grant available to us. So it's just another tool for us to keep growing as a foundation.
Well, all of this sounds absolutely fantastic, and I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. Again, remind us of the website for the foundation, and I assume you also have a Facebook page?
Sure. The website is browncountygives.org, and our Facebook page is Brown County Community Foundation.
Well, Madison Miller, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your enthusiasm and this information, and we wish you all the very best in your new position.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, here we are. Do you know what month this is? This is February, the month of love. You know, the 14th, Valentine's Day, when we're all supposed to get a little mushy and sweetie and honey and sugar plum. This is when it's okay and even encouraged to tell people that you love them. A fine, noble gesture. There is a certain feeling or emotion that is described by the word love. That would make love a noun, I believe, describing when humans have these mushy type of sensations. The sensation of knowing someone for a long period of time and allowing the trust, the confidence, and respect for another to grow, that long-term relationship is also described with the word love. There is another kind of love, the verb, the action word, the type of action that earns the aforementioned trust, confidence, and respect. Holding a door open? Sure. Being a good employee or a good boss? Being an asset to the community. These all can make one highly appreciated and loved. Not to belabor the point, but there's a lot going on in our society and culture and around the world that does not fall under any definition of love. Watch the news, the violence on TV and in the movies, garbage in, garbage out, violence, hatred, and fear in, violence, hatred, and fear out. Are we surprised when it hits the streets and people reenact what is filtered through their brain? We shouldn't be. The endless wars we are having, we're destroying our atmosphere and planet. My goodness. We're sending men to the moon and into space orbits. We are growing and developing around the globe as the human race. Technology, probably every country has a satellite now. That's all shared technology and communications. What would happen if they all started running into each other? It's not neighbor against neighbor or even country against country. We're all humans all over the world. We're at a stage in our evolution when we have to decide if destruction is to dominate or if the fruits of constructivity, positivity, and love will prevail. Now there's a word that describes love, decide. We have to decide. The action of love is a decision. We must decide to love, decide to help someone in need cross the street, decide to take care of the earth, decide to tip the waitstaff well, decide to forgive, decide to give a helping hand. Love is a decision. We make it every day. I've got 2 girls at Lowe's who compete for me to come to their register. Why? Because I talk to them when they ring me up. It's the same with tips. If you're generous, they remember it, and they are ever eager to serve you when you come in. Let's take this month and dedicate it to the art of love. Christmas has virtually an entire month to build up to it. To love, we need reminded of how to love. We could all use some lessons. At this pivotal point in our development, let's learn more about how love overrides hate. Let's grow in our understanding of how to live in love. So if you're in love, show it. Let them know that they're your main squeeze. Get a little mushy with your sweetie. If you decide to love, spread it around. Radiate that force field, that energy, into everything and everyone in your day-to-day life. Happy Valentine's Day and happy month of love.
There, I saw your face. It drifted in today. Why? Oh, tell me why are you so far away? They don't understand. They all have lost the fight. But me, I pray all day until I cry all night. Tears falling down. Tears soak the ground. Tears wash this town just like rain. Sun, you say the sun. I used to watch it shine. Oh, so many things I must have thought were mine. But here I give to you the love that burns inside, and take away with you the love that turns the tide. Tears falling down. Tears soak the ground. Tears wash this town just like rain. You say the sun. I used to watch it shine. Oh, so many things I once had thought were mine. Tears falling down. Tears soak the ground. Tears wash this town just like rain. There, I saw your face. It drifted in today. Why? Oh, tell me why are you so far away? There, I saw your face. It drifted in today.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 in Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
Our final segment begins with the Susan Clearwater interview. Dave Seastrom has a few timely words about winter survival. And we'll close the show with the late show tune, Sha-La-La.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Clearwater, and she's here to talk about her recently published book, The Art of Herbal Healing, A Guide to Health and Wholeness. Well, hi, Susan.
Hi, Dave. So glad to be here.
Well, just as a matter of full disclosure, Susan and I are actually friends and have known each other for many years. Speaking of that, how many years have you been working on this book?
Well, I've been saying 25 years for a few years now.
Well, there you go. This is truly a labor of love, and it's an enormous book, very comprehensive. I've looked all through it, and I can tell that it's just chock full of excellent information and a bit of medical history going back to the beginning of time. Why don't you describe your book to us?
Well, basically, The Art of Herbal Healing, A Guide to Health and Wholeness, is a 700-page reference book, and it has enough information and step-by-step instructions and lots of colored pictures to enable people to safely use herbs for healing and promoting their good health. It's basically a dynamic, hands-on exploration into the world of medicinal herbalism, and it empowers people to interact with the plants at whatever level you choose, from gardening, harvesting, creating teas and other preparations, to learning which herbs are helpful for specific issues. The book basically has two major sections. In the first section, the fundamentals of medicinal herbalism are covered, and this gives the basics for using herbs safely and responsibly. And as Dave says, it includes chapters about the history of herbalism and early medicine, botany specific for herbalists, the safety of herbal medicine, and also how to cultivate, harvest, and create all types of preparations, including teas, salves, tinctures, poultices, eye washes, ear drops, and many more kinds of preparations. It's amazing how many things you can make with medicinal herbs. The second section is the Materia Medica, and this contains information on 50 different herbs, and these are plants that I've grown and used in my nursing practice for many years, so I know these plants well. The book is really user-friendly. It's really long, 700 pages, and so I've made it easy to read. And it has two indexes, the basic general index, but it also has an index of health issues, so that if you have a cold, you have a stomach ache, you can look that up and find out what herbs are specific for the issue that you're looking at.
Well, you also discuss not only the plants themselves, but how to use them and how much to use. So that's very comprehensive. Well, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? I mean, you're an herbalist, but you also went through conventional Western medicine and became a nurse.
Right. I studied nursing. I went to the IU School of Nursing and got a Bachelor of Science degree. And then I worked at Bloomington Hospital as a medical surgical nurse for almost 4 years, which was a great experience. I really learned how to be a nurse by working at the hospital. But the reason I went into nursing was to have my own holistic practice. And so I left the hospital and began my private practice as a holistic nurse. And I've been doing that for more than 25 years. I see people of all ages for all kinds of different health problems, and I really love my practice. It's a great way to be with people.
Well, you also conduct seminars and have people that become apprenticed to you.
Right. I also own and manage Green Turtle Botanical Sanctuary here in Brown County, and that's where I grow my medicinal herbs. I make my salves and tinctures. Tinctures are alcohol extracts of herbs, by the way, and they're a wonderful, potent form of herbal medicine that does not expire. And I sell my herbal products to local health food stores and clients in my nursing practice. And as you said, Dave, I have taught a lot of classes and apprenticeship programs about medicinal herbs and different topics of holistic healing over the past 20 years.
How did you get interested in medical herbs?
Well, in the introduction of my book, I mentioned how nature's always been a source of refuge in my life, and it definitely helps me connect with some inner peace and calm. Spending lots of time in nature, gardening, and observing nature's forces and cycles have been my main teachers about holism, which includes balancing our habits, our thoughts, and our lives in general to promote good health. My journey with herbs began when I was about 18 years old and I had a really bad head cold. My friend Jeffrey Morris made a cup of golden seal tea. It was really bitter, but I drank it, and the next morning I felt so much better that I was amazed. And that experience literally hooked me into my interest in herbalism. And so I started a lifelong study about medicinal herbs and started working with them. I read a lot of books and magazines. I bought herbs in health food stores and used them when I was sick. And when I moved into my log cabin home in 1980 here in Brown County, I discovered that so many medicinal herbs grow wild in the woods and the meadows. And I started growing them in my gardens, and I took some classes and I learned how to make tinctures and salves. And my friends started coming over and asking me, what's good for this and what's good for that? And when I was working in the hospital, nurses would come to me and ask me what herb is good for this. And so I got a lot of experience that way. And then over the years, several people told me, Susan, you should write a book. And that was
easy for
the
them
beginning.
to say.
Yeah, easy to say.
Yeah. Well, you made a reference to Jeffrey Morris, who is one of the founding fathers of WFHB. So this is all circles within circles.
It is indeed.
And I understand that Michael Kelsey also played a role in helping you get this book together.
Yep, he helped me with all my some more Adobe InDesign issues, and Mike was great.
Well, there you go. From WFHB to your garden to your book, it's just all one big happy family.
It is a beautiful world.
I have to say, one of the lines that I really liked from your book, and it's right at the end of your introduction, and it says, "May you feel the heartbeat of Mother Earth within your own heart, and may the beauty, wisdom, and healing gifts of the plants enrich your life and make you whole." And I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Thank
you.
you.
Susan, how can we get a hold of one of these marvelous books?
Well, it's available in paperback and hardcover. You can find my book, The Art of Herbal Healing, on my website at greenturtlebotanicals.com.
Well, I already have a copy, and I highly recommend it, and I've been enjoying it. So I was reading on the back of your book that there are several reviews from some pretty major herbalists, Rosemary Gladstar, Paul Strauss, and Stephen Foster. Pretty ringing endorsements from some of the heavy hitters in the world of herbalism. I think that even if you don't know who these people are, anyone could look at your book and find it to be quite impressive and full of great information. So, Susan, thank you so much for coming in and sharing this book with us.
Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it.
A polar vortex swept into the heart of the old Northwest Territory, and over the weekend we had a true snowpocalypse. Storms like this are often predicted, but almost never manifest as severely as the forecasters envision. But by God, this time they were right, and we had a whoop-ass, full-blown, cold-as-hell, wind-howling whiteout. If ever there was a night not fit for man nor beast, this was it. For days leading up to the storm, the forecast continued to change. First, it was going to the north of us. Then, it looked like we might be in the rain belt. And then, as the weekend drew near, it looked like it was heading straight for us. The rain began to fall early Saturday, and when the temperatures remained steady in the mid-40s, many of us thought that we had dodged the bullet. Nonetheless, the warnings came thick and heavy, and otherwise sane people crowded into the grocery stores, ready to fight to the death for the last loaf of Wonder Bread. The more sane among us decided that we probably had enough to get by, and stayed away from the madness and the raw confrontation. At dusk, the temperature began to plummet, and the rain began to freeze. In combination with high winds, this mix all but guarantees that the power will go out. The trees and the electric lines become coated with heavy ice. The wind breaks the ice-laden tree branches that fall on the overly weighted power lines, and a moment later, all semblance of the 21st century is gone, and we are cast into total darkness. When the infrastructure is heavily damaged, Crews of dedicated workers brave life and limb to work around the clock to replace broken power poles and string new power lines. The work is much harder and more extensive in a forested area, and it often takes several days to restore the network. The longest power outage I remember was in the 1990s, and at that time we were without power for 5 days. While we didn't make the last-minute grocery run, my wife Becky and I had a host of things we did to get ready for the big storm. A wood stove is a sure source of heat when the lights go out, and I made sure we had an ample supply of firewood stacked on the kitchen porch where it's protected from the weather. While I was bringing wood into the house, Becky filled the bird feeders to make sure our little feathered friends would have plenty to eat. We have an ornamental fish pond next to the house, and we run a couple of bubblers that keep the water open for the fish, which also provides a water source for the birds. When the birds and the fish were taken care of, we filled several jugs with water. When we lose power, our pump doesn't run, and a water reserve means that we can flush the toilets and have water to cook with and make coffee. In our house, surviving the storm definitely includes the ability to make coffee. Speaking of coffee, we have an old-fashioned coffee grinder that allows us to grind the beans by hand. It's sort of like hand-cranking ice cream, only different. We also have an antique gas cook stove that doesn't require electricity to operate, which allows us to prepare meals and heat water whether we have power or not. Illuminating the house when the power is out requires a combination of old and new. We have a couple of kerosene lamps that are fully functional, and we have several battery-powered lights, flashlights, and headlamps. If the cell towers continue to function, we can access the internet via a battery-powered laptop and a wireless connection. We also have the ability to charge our phones by running the cars. Battery-powered radios round out the ensemble, and when everything's in place, we're as ready as we can be for whatever comes next. Both Becky and I were scouts when we were kids. We were taught that it's good to be prepared, and living in the sticks for many years has shown us how to do that. When everything was in place and we were officially hunkered down for the storm, the temperature dropped and the ice began to form on the entire forest. Within a few minutes, the wind picked up, and as it began to howl, the trees swayed and the freezing rain changed to sideways blowing snow. As the storm roared in, we were kicked back, all warm and cozy. The fire was blazing in the wood stove, and the dogs were stretched out in front of it without a care in the world. Somehow, we never lost power, and when I got up in the middle of the night to load the stove, I stepped outside into the frigid air. I was nearly overwhelmed by the elegance of the almost full moon as it illuminated the forest covered in its blanket of new fallen snow. As I stood there surrounded by this incredible beauty, I thought to myself, hell, if this is the apocalypse, it ain't so bad after all. This is Dave Seastrom. See you next time.
Sha la 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 la, sha la 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 la.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 83 of the Brown County Hour, recorded in our studio at the History Center here in downtown Nashville, and brought to you the first Sunday of every month at 9 a.m. and the following Wednesday at 6 p.m.
The Brown County Hour is brought to you by a diverse group of folks who believe now more than ever the world is for everyone.
This show was produced by
Chuck Wills,
Pam Rader,
Rick Fettig,
Vera Grubbs,
Jim Lemon,
and Dave Seastrom. We would also like to thank Slats Klug for our theme music. You have been listening to the Brown County Hour,
coming to you from deep in the woods of Brown County, Indiana.
celebrating the arts, culture, and nature that make this such a unique community.
Visit us online at browncountyhour.com.
The Brown County Hour is a production of WFHB.
volunteer-powered, listener-supported community radio for South Central Indiana.
Take me back to my old Brown County home.